So welcome everyone to Cerulean Arts Gallery for tonight's tour and talk for the current collective exhibition, which features the work of Karen Rapp Bull, Dan Crowley, Katie Knoeringer, Ginny Perry, and Dressler Smith. So the exhibition is on view through February 6th. You can come down and see it in person. We're open Wednesday through Friday, 10 to 6, Saturday, Sunday, noon to 6, closed Monday and Tuesday. And you can see everything on our website. I'll put a link to the show in the chat. You can check that out. And as we go, I'll link to individual artists. So let's see, what else?
Stay on mute.
Oh yeah, please stay muted unless you're one of the artists speaking. And we are recording this, so we will edit and put it on YouTube in the next day or so. So if you want to see it again, or if someone you know couldn't make it, they can check it out. So I'm going to spotlight the Cerulean Arts video for us. So Tina's going to walk through the gallery. We're going to visit each artist. And I'm also going to spotlight the first artist that we're going to visit tonight is Ginny Perry. Hi, Ginny, how are you? So would you like to speak about yourself and your work we're seeing here?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I am Ginny Perry, and I'm from Upper Bucks County, a rural community. And I'm presently a high school art educator. I was an illustrator, graphic designer, taught illustration for many years at a local college, and was also an owner of a small art school in Doylestown. In this show, you will see 3 different themes, and landscapes, cityscapes, and paintings and drawings where I address the nursing home culture, aging, and Alzheimer's. This first painting on the left is memories of our summer vacations in Avalon. And when I do landscapes, I work very spontaneously and quick. I don't plan. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. But I really enjoy working this way because I feel like I get a lot of emotion in my work. And the next one, this was actually an ink painting that was the after effects of one of the hurricanes. This was in my backyard. Again, quick, spontaneous, and done with obviously a lot of ink markings. Okay, before I talk about these pieces, I'd like to give you a little bit of a background on why I do the work I'm going to show you. I am a volunteer interfaith lay chaplain in a nursing home. These paintings are about my experiences speaking and listening to the residents. I've met with personalities from all walks of life. My job is not necessarily about religion, but it's more about bringing the light out of people and listening. Their stories are amazing. This is Betty. Betty prefers to be alone. She's an isolator in the nursing home. She is not interested in activities. She's kind and respectful, but likes the peacefulness of her room. And this was done with an ink wash. The next one is Dr. B. Dr. B was a successful pulmonologist who was diagnosed with dementia a few years ago. He's a kind, gentle, talkative man who is very, very proud of his grown children. He talks about them often. He doesn't always remember their names, but when he does talk about them, he just absolutely glows. And this is done with string dipped in ink. And the next one is also another painting where I did the string and ink technique. This is called Helen and Hospice Care. Helen was in hospice care for many years, but recently passed. She had a sharp mind, a sharp wit, funny, combative. She loved country music and had a wonderful family. And the next one is called Convalescing, One Step at a Time. This is Patrice. Patrice is the nursing home troublemaker, and she is sharp as a tack, but complains when the staff is not doing their jobs. She is smart, delightful, funny, and loves to flirt with the male residents. Years ago, she used to ride her motorcycle through the countryside, and she was a surgical nurse too. Hard for Patrice to be contained in a nursing home, and I love speaking to her, and I don't mind her complaining. It's actually, it's quite fun. And in this painting was done with poured acrylic where I scrape and I also add acrylic. If you ever go to my website, I have lots of Patrice paintings because she gives me permission to draw her and photograph her. So I've got quite a few of her pieces of her. And the next one is called Love Conquers. This is Jean. She has severe dementia. She can't communicate, but responds to touch and a gentle voice. She loves when her family visits. And this is done with ink, acrylic, and charcoal. This next one is called Phyllis Sitting. Phyllis often stares out the window. She seems peaceful, responds with her eyes and a smile, doesn't really speak. And this is done with ink markings. And the next one is Barbara. And Barbara, who had severe dementia, passed from COVID this year. She was very happy, very social, talked constantly, made no sense. But when she sang, she loved music. Her lyrics were totally cohesive, and she would even break out into harmonies. It was unbelievable. And her family told me that she used to be a piano player and would love to entertain. And this was done with ink and thick acrylic paint. I also have calligraphy in the background, and there's a lot of activity in this painting. And the next one is George, waiting for his wife. It was done with gouache. George often waits by the door for his wife to visit. He's usually confused and anxious and worried, but he waits and he waits. The next painting is something very dear to my heart. And maybe it's because Ben was an artist. He had a stellar career as an illustrator in New York City. His work was on the cover of Time magazine, Newsweek, Sports Illustrated, and he won numerous awards. He illustrated books and even wrote his own book. He taught college and traveled around the world. Dementia took over his life about 6 years ago. It was wonderful because I got to meet his wife and heard a lot more of his story. He recalled very, very little when I would speak to him, but I used to love to draw with him. And he couldn't draw details, but he used to love to draw people, but he would draw shadows. And they were just stunning, absolutely stunning. And Ben actually passed away last year at the age of 93. And the last one of the series in the nursing home that's in this show is called the social room, the common room. I'm sorry. It's the room where all the residents play games, bingo, trivia, cards, and watch movies and have conversation. And the last two pieces, well, the one that's coming up next is poured and scraped acrylic. And it's about driving through Brooklyn to visit my daughter. And I liked capturing the chaos in the energy of the city. And the last one in the show is, it's called Window View. And this is actually a gloomy day looking outside a window at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. So thank you. And if you have any questions, send it through the chat.
Thank you, Ginny. So next we're heading into Dan Crowley's exhibition. Hey, Dan.
Hello. All right, so my work, it's more on animation, movies. Been getting a little bit into like floral and fantasy landscapes. Now these smaller paintings, they're sort of like extractions from some of my larger ones where I kind of focused in on like a flower type thing. The smaller I work, I tend to get a little more textured, but it's really about texture, color. It's more like, this is more traditional type things as far as something that you would put in a house. Something that I might be able to carry around in my car a little more. Whereas my larger pieces, they're more like seated into like movies. Like here, it's a fantasy landscape, couldn't really exist. I'll put multiple moons, mountains in the sky, any old thing that, you know, it's color combinations. When I get into the larger ones, I start adding like characters. So, you know, the characters are more from, the ideas are from like Tim Burton movies, Dr. Seuss, any Disney type thing. And I look at their drawings and I don't copy anything exactly, but the ideas are in my head. And I do things out of my head. I usually don't look at a source. That one there, you have a night sky and a day sky in the same painting. A lot of times I'll actually cast a shadow on the sky, which of course would never exist. Obviously, they're very colorful. I tend to try to handle the paint almost like crayons out of the coloring box. There are, you know, I'll put the oranges with the yellows, this or that. I do a little bit of mixing, but for the most part, I tend to stick to the color wheel. As far as my background, I went to Westchester University, graduated in 1994. Professionally with a Bachelor of Fine Arts, but professionally I tended to be in heavy industry, power plant. Now this one here is from Aberrat. It's a book. One of my favorite artists is Clive Barker. Now he's known for Hellraiser and all the scary stuff, but he actually did a series of books, and it was based on some paintings where they were very childish, colorful. And the way he handled the paint, he was using like a steak knife, scratching in and pulling some of the colors underneath out. And so I've adopted some of that, like where I use a steak knife, and as I build up the textures, I'll scratch through it And to me, it's sort of like drawing a little bit more with the knife. So you get more lines and something visually more interesting. This one here is Meet the Lorax, I think. And that is Dr. Seuss inspired. Got a little Disney Mickey in the bottom. Jack Skellington, Doctor Who. So I'm sort of meshing a lot of TV and movie ideas together, almost to get like a big immersion. When I do the large paintings, the idea is I want people to sort of walk in and just sort of feel like they walked into like an amusement park, like a fun house, where it's sort of just encompassing everything, where you feel like you're in that environment. So that's sort of that's one of the reasons I tend to do the larger paintings. I just feel like it's, sticks out more at you. The smaller paintings, I'm sort of trying to get on this type of level, but it's, smaller brushes, it's a little more difficult for me. So sometimes I just simplify it down to like a flower or a character. Again, this is a fantasy landscape. I've got a huge moon with icicles coming down, amusement park in the corner, figure of like it's almost like a sculpture, the face there, it's kind of carved out and hollow. And I've got a balloon kind of, rising from it. So it's a mixture of landscapes, we've got a tornado, multiple suns. Now there's some of the smaller pieces I have, and it's more or less female figures. I call them water pixies. So I've added wings and trying to make them little decorative, colorful things, but it's simplified figure drawing. I don't go into details. A lot of times I don't even put arms in there. I'll just chop a piece off and simplify it, so you're not being, too directed to some small thing. This is a portrait, trying to do a face. It's not a portrait of anybody. I did it out of my head, but it's sort of like a fertility piece. You can look at it longer, figure that one out. Again, another water pixie. So there's flowers, figure, fantasy landscape a little bit. Kind of simple, short and sweet. This one here is Aphrodite. This one heavily textured. The smaller I work, the more textured I seem to be able to get, but sort of build up some of those textures. I use two types of oil paint. One of them's Lucas. You get it at Jerry's Artorama, and I use it in Pasture medium, so it's able to build up some of these textures. I also use liquid as well as linseed oil, but the liquid it dries faster, but it almost makes it look acrylic. So I sort of do a combination because I still like the oily, more glossy finish than you would get with liquid. So I've got Kitty on the left. That took a while. I just kept working it, and I actually used scrapings from the palette and mixed it with impassioned butter to build up some of that texture on this one. But it's just, cat in the night. Of course, the cat's bright as can be. So I'm not really following any rules how it would actually look if it was real or anything. It's all imagination and sort of playful. Avian Sanctuary, I actually did this a couple of years back. I think this was at the end of 2019. Now this one of my favorite artists is a guy named Mark Messersmith. He's a professor in Florida, and he does these landscapes, but the color mixing, it's almost reminds you of something you would see in the movie Avatar. But they're always in the woods with all these animals. Now I just do fantasy stuff, so I don't really care. I break whatever rules, but it's sort of like a single point perspective with the trees. And then when I got down, I actually created a planet. But I threw a lot of different types of birds. They're usually simplified, but it's sort of like almost a collage of landscapes that I'm throwing together here. You know, I have like a Saturn type thing in there. I have moons in the background. You know, sunset at the top. At the bottom, I think this one might have like palms in a desert. So it's sort of a collage of ideas that are just thrown together. And, you know, the handling, it's, you know, color chords, you know, a couple colors that work together, and do a little bit of scratching with that one. But they're more or less, yeah, it's out of my head. These are some of the smaller ones where I'm trying to just, you know, focus in on like a flower. Again, I'm not really looking at anything. I'm just doing leaves or flowers, and sort of like this one's just a couple greens and blues and then some yellow to contrast with it. Some of the stuff I'll let paint drip, go back the next day, start scratching at some of it. That's another one. It's just a few flowers, and then the bottom's supposed to be like a field of flowers, but simplified into just little brush strokes, something I guess you would see with it like an impressionist. And then this one is mushrooms and flowers. So it's sort of like a smaller version of my larger paintings, but I took out the cartoons and just went with like a landscape type thing. Multiple moons in the back still, a couple mountains, but the focus is 3 flowers, where these were heavily textured. I may have even used the back of a paintbrush, like the stick part, and scratch through. Tend to outline things almost like if something was backlit. So it's kind of pulling an outline of the colors, but this is just something where I'm trying to get everything to sort of work together into a fantasy landscape, you know, waterfalls, this or that. And that's about it. As far as artists, yeah, it was Mark Messersmith, Clive Barker, Ken Mabry, Stephanie Gutkiel, and they're living artists. And then my painting teacher, Gus Sermus, he's also a member of this gallery, and he was always into more flower. His paintings are like very colorful, large, designed type things, and then he does figure drawing. But I'm still friends with him today, and it's been almost 30 years. Yeah, I graduated in December '94.
Thank you, Dan. It's a fantastic show.
Thank you.
So now we're moving into Dressler Smith's gallery. Dressler?
Hello, everyone. My path started out Philadelphia. When I was 4, we moved to Southern New Jersey, where it was very quiet. And college background, I graduated from Moore College of Art, but I went to a lot of schools and classes on Saturday classes, including the one at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, where, thank goodness, thank God, I was able to show there in the sales and rental gallery for about 5 years. And then graduated from Moore College of Art with a Bachelor in Fine Art. So my work is pretty much in series. The first series that you saw on the outer wall was In Search of My Mother's Garden. My mother was very important to me. My father too. He took me to all those classes. My mother never drove. And so I found that when my mother passed away, I started to, a way of healing was for me to draw gardens, and also the African-American community. It's a lot about females in my family background quilting, as African-American women made quilts for their households in order to be able to keep their children warm, and they couldn't have a path like I have as an artist. I find that I'm honoring those women through my art. This is, however, the very first show that I'm adding in quilting a friend of mine, as a way of framing my pieces, made quilts for my oil paintings, my small.
We're looking at those right now, Dressler, your quilted
Great,
pieces.
great. So those pieces, the quilt part was done by a friend, very important to me. African-American women, for those who saw the G's Ben quilters, they sometimes quilt in community. So my friend Winifred, she helped me with these. Winifred Jenkins. Oh, I saw it for a second. I did see the gallery for a second. I don't know. Somehow I just saw that, but it was just a glimpse. So anyway, those pieces also honor the women's gardens. So gardens in their quilts were what they had to express their art. I want to honor my grandmother Prisette and my grandmother Texan and all those women who came before me. My great-grandmother, who was Native American, one of them, and I want to honor everyone through my work. The stained glass comes in, I don't fabricate, however, the fabrication was done by a person who did the stained glass windows for churches that I designed. I've only designed for 3 so far. Where are we now, Mike?
We're looking at your 2 medium-size pastel landscapes, the
Okay.
sunrise.
So those pieces, the sunset pieces,
twilight. It's in the midst 5 and twilight.
Okay, great. So in the midst and twilight are from my journeys through down basically to the coast, through the coast, intercoastal waterway. Those are the intercoastal waterway. I like to use oil paint underneath of my pastel. I sort of think of it like Monet, who added in pigment to his oil and just mixed up the colors. And it sort of gives it like a, I don't know, just gives it something different. And all my pieces, I just really feel a spiritual connection somehow to, I wrote a book. It's The Inspirational Journey of Dressler Smith. If anyone ever wanted to see the little blurb about it, it just basically tells you about the spiritual connection as I have to the piece, the large piece, the large landscape.
Yeah, we're looking at that one right now in his presence.
Yes, in his presence. So getting up in the morning and just making a spiritual connection with Creator, and how I really believe that each day we get a new day, a new time to start over again. Erasing our past mistakes, trying not to think about them, and moving on to our new beginning, to the next phase in our lives.
Dressler, these pastels, are you doing them on the spot or are they in the studio?
So most of the time I start with a small thumbnail sketch. If anyone knows what that is, it's about the size of your hand. And I do a thumbnail sketch. I take photographs, do my thumbnail sketch, sometimes go sit and have a cup of coffee and draw from memory right there on the spot. Usually these partially, not the ones other was from Florida. The others are from the large pieces from Cape May. And I love Cape May. I love Cape May sunrise. And it's a real wonderful place to me that I just feel so connected to. The landscape with the snow scene is in South Jersey, Southern New Jersey.
Yeah, we're just coming up to that one now, the snow scene.
Great. So the snow scene is how it was done in a state where I did a mural inside of the people's home, and I was invited back. They told me you can take our boat out on the lake, you know, and they had swans, and it was just a gorgeous place. And I almost fell. So the name of that piece is Ice Dance, because I was dancing on the ice. And yet, no, I did not do that on the spot. Of course, I did that back in my studio. So the next pieces are, I'm looking at my photographs on my phone.
So we're looking at the In Search of My Mother's Garden, red tulip and garden tulips.
Okay, so I found that after my mother passed away, that all across the whole entire front of the property, like the whole entire lot had beautiful tulips that still came up even after she passed away. And that just felt so important to me, you know, and it's a part of healing. I put my hand out and held one of the tulips, and I took a series of photographs. Of course, they didn't come up year after year after year, but I found that the first 2 years after she had passed, they did come up, and it was just a gorgeous thing to me. If anyone wants to look on InTouch website, intouch.org, it has some of my story and description. The large tulip, the really large tulip in the middle, is the center of the last flower that came up of my mom's. And as I said, important to me, but probably only to me. Larger than my face, larger than my head, like 2 feet wide, this huge inside of the tulip. And I think of the inside of the tulip as a mother nurturing her baby, like inside and out comes this wonderful, wonderful blessing of a beautiful flower. The other piece on that wall is oil on paper. I do prefer, if I'm painting in oils, even then also to paint on paper. I gesso first and then go about doing that. I taught college as an adjunct for 25 years, and I love everyone's art. I have to say, I love everyone's art because I'm so used to describing all different kinds of artworks, and I'm a great appreciator. So I appreciate everyone's pieces that are in the gallery now.
Dressler, could you speak about the pears for preserving memories?
Sure. So the pears for preserving memories, I did because I always have paintings of pears along the way, because my father used to put me on a ladder when I was a little girl, and I used to have to climb the ladder to pick pears for him because he loved pear preserves. He grew up in Georgia, and it was just a thing for him. So I named it Pears for Preserving Memories. And that original quilt was a quilt I lost in a fire. The original quilt that I painted there, I lost in a fire, but then I had another one that was made. I traded a painting for a quilt that was made almost exactly like that one that I had lost. So it encompasses memories of my mom and my dad, who, as you can tell, I just talk about, but they were just so important in my life. And, you know, being able to go to college without having a loan or anything like that. I graduated a long time ago in 1980, but there were a lot of sacrifices made by those two people in my life. So I really, you know, I appreciate everything that they did.
So now we're gonna hit the outer wall with the 3 sacred lotus pieces.
Okay, so speaking of my dad, so this garden is where he was from in Georgia. And the person who started this garden is Lockerly Arboretum in Milledgeville, Georgia area, right in the center of Georgia. They call it Middle Georgia, that area. But also, it is a part of my In Search of My Mother's Garden series because, as I said, I wasn't even painting flowers, pretty much not at all. I'm really, the paintings that are done for me are the paintings that are of the my landscapes, my beach landscapes. absolutely love the beach and waterways. Those are the paintings I do. I say that I do for me. The others are in honor or in memory of people. I pray over my work before I even get started and see what comes out, and hopefully they touch the person's spirit, the viewer's spirit. The Lotus I love because they're coming up out of the mud. So it's like this, I don't have a philosophy about it or anything. It just happened to be that I used to go to Longwood and see them there, but then afterwards I found that a cousin took me to this garden and I was just floored because the garden was just so beautiful there in Georgia. And she said, I thought you would like it, but what she didn't know was that I was going to jump up and down because I absolutely loved the garden. It was just, I mean, the Lotus are as big as my face. So they were just so gorgeous. And they were as tall as me and some of them taller because that garden had been there for so long. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dressler. It's a great
You're welcome.
collection.
Thank you.
So now we're heading into Karen Rapp Bull's exhibition. Hi, Karen.
Hi, everyone. Glad you could. We're starting with this, a little bit about myself. I did go to some art school, and then I went to school for graphic design. I was a graphic designer for a little while, and then I worked in a nonprofit in management, and after that, I retired and started to paint. Most of these paintings were, all of these paintings were done towards the end of April of 21. And I did dedicate this to my friend Tilde, who had been a painting partner of mine for 6 years. She passed away April 1st in 21. These 3 paintings here, they're oil paintings, and I think that as I was painting them, I didn't realize what they really were because I was focusing mostly on color and looking at different artists. There was a British artist here named Mary Fedden who I looked at and got some of those colors from some of her works, and moved on with other figures. This figure, I think the table came from a Matisse painting I had seen. So I used lots of different references. I keep looking at different things as I create these. These are mostly my imagination. The figures themselves are from my imagination. And what I decided was that they ended up really speaking to me as archetypes, mostly just those archetypes that transform us and give us energy. This painting is magic. I think that's what I call it, the magic blue vase. It started off quite differently, and then one day I walked in the studio and saw it completely different, changed the vase, changed the background, changed the colors. And to me, this also became a different kind of energy, an energy that, which I think is sort of transformative in that it's quite magical. This painting is called the View of the Empty Pasture, which the one on the left, there is a pasture across the road from where I live, and there's usually sheep grazing in it. This one is kind of moody, and I think that it's also a play between the checkerboard and the shapes of the flowers. And my other painting partner, Ellen, had said to me, I said, I really want to put a sheep in there. She said, no, don't do it. So I think that it would have killed the mood. I mean, it does have a specific mood that is almost empty of life. This still life was from a photograph I had taken at a friend's party of some flowers that my stepdaughter has actually grown in her garden. But I get a set, I was really intrigued by the dark background against the brilliance of the flowers. And as I painted it, I was focusing on the empty space in front of the vase that I brought a glow to. And I feel like that was an interesting contrast to the background, and it gave it a certain kind of a mood. This is a really special painting for me. I found a painting of Tilde when she was a child in Paris. She was about 8 years old. It was not, I found a photograph of her, black and white. She was standing before a cathedral with some pigeons around her. And I had had a really difficult time after she passed of getting back in the studio and really being able to work. So I painted this painting of her pretty quickly. And after I did, I just felt this entire lifting of my spirit, as if she had, really brought me some peace and was saying, go for it, Karen. Let's, get painting now. That's the type of person she was. I called this the joyful child because there was so much joy in her body language there. Now this one was painted later. It's called Tilde Painting in Her Garden. I think I probably didn't do this one until November of 21. But I had done numerous sketches in the spring and summer of 2020 in her backyard. We would meet because of COVID and distance ourselves, and there was always some kind of still life with some beautiful hydrangeas. And I did watercolor sketches and a gouache painting, and then this painting came about later. It's an oil painting that for me is just encompasses all the love that I felt for her as a friend and as a fellow painter. Just a wonderful human being. She always wore those signature blue shoes too, which was fun. The next painting is very dark. It was a day when I went into the studio and felt pretty gloomy, but I had a pair there and I had a canvas, and I thought, just get cracking here. And I recalled a painting that Tilde had done right after the election. In what year was that? 2017. It was for the Woodmere Art Museum, and she had done a dark painting with a coffee cup floating in the front and a little beam of light in the back. So I took my pair and I thought of that and came up with this. And I think it's an example of some of the darkness that I was feeling at the same time in 2017, and also in my life during COVID and during after she passed. This is my favorite wall in the show. I just think it just has a very strong feeling. The two very tall paintings of the women were on very narrow canvas, and a kind of a difficult challenge for me to get it to work right. So this particular painting, we had Tilde and I had downloaded from a website some black and white photographs of models. And there was one of a woman holding a cat. And as I started working on it, this woman just evolved into this wild creature that the woman in the photograph was quite petite and calm, but this wild creature came out, and I believe this is an archetype of a wild woman. And in my life, I have always been drawn to the archetype of the wild woman. She keeps showing up in my life, especially when I forget her. And the movement in this is something that I think brings you to that feeling. These series of paintings, there's 4 of them here, were inspired by Tilde. She came into the studio one day with this black sketchbook and a gel pen and started doing her famous contour drawings, and then started to, I think she used watercolor quite more than I did. I used color pencil and a little bit of watercolor. And I find them to be very relaxing, as opposed to oil painting, which takes a whole lot more energy. These are grounded and calm and peaceful, and I really enjoyed doing them. And the way that they are framed with the edge of the sketchbook torn out are the way that Tilde framed them in the show that was recently in the gallery in April. She had similar drawings. So you can see she inspired me in so many ways, as a person, as an artist, as a friend. This is a garden, my garden in the back. There's a little owl. This is called the Morning Spirit, another archetype, which this painting began using acrylic wash, not oil, which is a water-based permanent paint. It was totally abstract when it started, until I started to see a figure form. And I struggled with it. In fact, I wasn't going to include it in the show. The color just didn't seem right to me. And one day I walked in the studio and said, let's get at it. And it came to a place where I was satisfied with it, and I felt it was a powerful painting and had a great deal of emotion. This wasn't, I also am very fond of German Expressionism, particularly a woman artist named Gabriele Munter. She had a relationship with Wassily Kandinsky in her life. And her paintings have these intense colors in them. This wall is going to shock you, but these actually were the first paintings I started in late April. I think I was trying to make a real attempt to deal with the effects of COVID on my emotions, and try to take this bright approach to painting. So these are all acrylic wash with oil on top. I start the painting in acrylic wash. Basically, they're all from my imagination. This one there may have been an avocado in the studio at the time, but they're basically from my imagination. And I tried to keep the intense color even as I was adding a little oil to them. This is a Mythical Mountain, very whimsical and fun. And this last one here is the whimsical tale of the blue cat, which is, they're all mixed media, which means they have more than one. They have acrylic wash, oil. This one actually has some cut paper glued on there, collage on the tabletop, and the cat's eyes. I know there are 2 cats in my show, but I'm allergic to them. I do like them. Anyway, this was another one where I was trying to set this mood of, you know, I feel that a lot of my work is narrative, but I always hope that when people look at it themselves, they find their own story in it. They find their own story that they can imagine and feel the emotion and feel it the way they feel it, not necessarily the way I'm feeling it when I paint. Definitely not. Here are the Night Rider and the Pickle in a Pickle. Just some fun things that they are a little dark still, but they were more fun. This one's called the Night Rider because I showed it to a little girl and she said, it looks like Jesus on a donkey. So it's got an interesting kind of energy. The other one is maybe a pickle, maybe cactus, but again, it's just trying to use large shapes to create a certain kind of energy and somewhat of a very abstract narrative. So wasn't fun. The whole thing was very challenging for me, and I'm happy that I was able to complete it and dedicate it in Tilde's memory.
Thank you, Karen.
Michael, Michael, this is Barry. May I interrupt? I was on mute. May I interrupt for just one moment?
Sure.
I don't know if you're entertaining comments, but I just feel compelled to make a comment and thank Karen for dedicating the show to Tilde. You need to know, as artists, Tilde was like, I'm sorry, but I will get through this. Tilde was on chemotherapy for 2 years. And her entire negotiation with her oncologist was to figure out a way that she could have her chemo and between cycles recover enough on Wednesday mornings to paint with Karen and with Ellen, who is also an excellent artist and I know is on the Zoom. And this desire to do that, because that was the most quality of her life, is really what got her through. So Karen, thank you not only for your great art, but for your great friendship. And I just want to say that in the paintings of Tilde, particularly the one where she was in Paris as an 8-year-old, that was so important in her life because her parents being Holocaust survivors, this was the first time they went back to Europe and they took her, and being out in that area and in Paris in this big open space just represented to her freedom, and it was great. And for us, being confined during the last year of her illness by the pandemic with all of our family, being able to work here and remotely, and we had a crew of 9 in the house at all times. It was remarkable how much her blue shoes were important. And you captured them sitting in the garden with you and Ellen, which was her favorite time. So I just have to thank you for capturing in your art the really meaningful spirit.
You're welcome, Barry. Those were some of the happiest times in the garden there, because your daughters were there, and Jonah and Ezra, your grandson, yes. And she was quite happy then. Yes. We had a lot of wonderful moments there.
And so my daughters have seen your show on the website and just commented how beautiful your work is. And
thanks, Barry.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Hey, Katie.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing all right. It says my internet connection is unstable though, so I hope you all can hear me.
We can. We'll wing
Okay.
it.
Okay, great. So
Yeah, tell us about yourself and your
okay.
work and your.
Oh no, I have
And who's that?
here, hang on just a second. He was sleeping just until this moment.
Of course.
So I'm Katie. I I have a 7-month-old. I'm from New Jersey originally, and now I live in Philadelphia. And I went to graduate school at Louisiana State University, which was kind of an adventure, living in Louisiana for 5 years. But I guess I kind of wanted to talk about these works in terms of I do a lot of drawing. And so all of these pieces are based on drawings that I made from life. And at some point, I mean, the pandemic, I guess, has something to do with this, but I was working outside a lot, drawing buildings, houses from the outside. And then at some point I switched to working in my patio. This piece is based on drawings from my little back patio space. There's sort of like a shared alleyway between my house and my neighbor's house with a chain link in between it. And so I started looking around my own space a lot more, around the outside, but then a lot inside too. And I guess when I'm drawing usually pretty fast, like kind of gesturally, and trying to record things and trying to like get the feel of things. But then when I make these are cut paper, collage maybe you could call it, but like cut painted paper. When I make these, it kind of slows me down. So I make these like a little more intuitive drawings, working from life. And then when I'm cutting up painted paper, I'm kind of like building these shapes and building the positive and the negative together. So, and this has come up in conversation, like talking to people recently, that the way that I make these is not sort of like if you were making a painting, you might like paint a background or paint a shape and then sort of like work on top of it. But these are pieces of paper like butting up against each other. And so I guess the reason why that's important to me is important to these works is that it's kind of like finding a way to draw with scissors. So to make these edges and have these shapes meet each other. And then I'm not opposed to sort of like layering and reshaping something, but that process of kind of like building them little piece by little piece is something that's really satisfying to me. And also the tactile quality of some of these. And I was so excited to meet everybody, the other artists, because I got to talk to Dressler, and I feel like there's something about, I just think that like what I'm doing has a really tactile quality to it. And some of Dressler's pieces when you see them in person, like the thickness of the paper and the textured surfaces are really beautiful and really interesting. And when I was making some of these bigger works, I thought a lot about how I was going to display them. And it was important to me to keep them kind of like free and feeling like objects. Because some of my smaller works, I do frame them, and I have framed bigger pieces before, but there's something like the paper, if you see these in person, they're kind of like, the paper is sort of like cockled and, you know, kind of a little uneven, and it's a little more, it starts to become a little bit more of an object. And when they're framed, I think, you know, the smaller ones, I think that works okay, but there's something different about framing them. So that's something that I've been exploring, kind of like building these out of paper and building onto them the borders, so that you know, so that they could be a little bit more, so they could stand on their own, maybe as objects, and almost like quilts. I think about quilting a lot, not in the same way, like I don't have a personal connection to it, like Dressler was speaking about, but creation standpoint, quilts as inspiration. And I did go to undergraduate at Kutztown University in Pennsylvania, near Allentown. And there is a large, there's a tradition of Pennsylvania Dutch, like quilting, and there's a summer festival that they have where there's just a huge display of these amazing quilts, and just the amount of work that goes into them and the process is just like, it's just mind-blowing to me. And so for me to be able to kind of like work a little bit slowly and like piece these little colored bits of paper together is kind of, I guess that's sort of maybe my way of quilting, of like a process that is like embraces irregularity, maybe rather than quilting and working with actual fabric and making a quilt. This is a different way for me to work, that I can kind of celebrate all those little quirky things that happen, and the surface being a little uneven.
So Katie, you're painting the paper that you use, correct?
Right.
So you're
right, and it's yeah. Go ahead.
You're particular about the color. You're not just using random papers.
Right. So yeah. So I guess some of the colors, the same colors kind of keep coming up. I think I end up sort of like mixing the same color, or like mixing similar colors. But I was gonna say, it's so funny because everybody I talked to about paint at the show was like, everybody loves acrylic gouache. I was like, oh, this is acrylic gouache, and everybody who I mentioned that to was like, oh, I love that. I love that kind of paint. So yeah, these are, I get like, it's so funny because my studio is full of all these little I get the little tubes of gouache, and then I'm painting sheets of paper. So yeah, then if I need more of a certain color, I'll paint some more, and then inevitably, you know, it has different brush marks in it, or it's a slightly different color, or it's slightly, you know, watered down, or it's a little, you know, it's a little bit different. And so I like that idea of kind of showing the process, that the pieces aren't all identical. There are subtle shifts in color and temperature and opacity. I see this comment from Ginny. Thank you.
It's beautiful stuff. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Mike.
So are there any questions for Katie or any of the other artists? All right, well, I guess we'll call it here. Thank you so much to the artists for your wonderful work and your talks tonight. And thank you to everyone for coming to the gallery talk. You can come to the gallery and see the show through February 6th. And thanks again and have a great night, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Mike.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mike.
Great.
Thank you, Tina.
Thanks, Tina.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah.
Thank you,
Good
everyone.
night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Bye.